Hey, this is Lizard Bites coming back to talk about some conspiracies in the food and health industry that are making us sick. Brought the tinfoil hat today because some of the things I talk about may not be in the normal line of what people commonly accept, and other people just, hey, that's normal life. That really is the way it is. So, one of the biggest questions is, do they want us dead? Answer is probably. But, at the same time, another question is do they want to make boatloads of money off of the consumer? And that answer is also yes. So it takes a lot of trying to figure out what's going on because the accepted American diet and what we should eat has changed a lot over the years. And even for myself, I followed a lot of different health trends and fad diets and yo-yoed up and down all of my life. Most recently, I have lost 90 pounds taking a GLP-1 drugs and modifying my diet to eliminate a lot of things like seed oils, preservatives, and anything that can really affect the gut microbiome or your digestion and things like that. So it's kind of Mediterranean, kind of paleo, kind of keto, just trying to keep it between the uprights and manage my symptoms and lose weight at the same time. So that's been a discovery process, but that's not the main focus of today. We're kind of doing something different because we blew the kitchen up and need to make some content anyway. So we're working on some videos and talking about some things that got me to where I'm at over time. So, one of the things that we have to look at is that a lot of people really keep a hard time figuring out what's going on with what is the healthiest. The science changes, new discoveries, and so on and so forth. And after you get to a certain age and you see all the things come and go, and you realize that, you never, sometimes you got a little healthier, sometimes you didn't, but the bag man always was able to walk away with, the spoils. So it's hard because, we have a lot of politically charged attitudes towards health and food these days to where the more liberal side acknowledges that there's a lot of deficiencies in the American diet and healthcare program and can look at the studies that say, hey, our healthcare spending is ridiculous for the outcomes that we have. And, overall must be something to do with the diet. But at the same time, when you go and you try to do anything about it, the two-edged sword, if you name a particular ingredient or food additive or preservative, and they'll scream, oh, there's no peer-reviewed science that says that that's horrible, so we can't really just throw that out with the bathwater either. And if you clean up your diet excuse me, too much, then you run the risk of getting into the RFK raccoon penis cult stuff, and that make America healthy again whole thing gets a little spooky to them because, at the same time, the left leaning idea that some of these industries and major corporations are bad, a couple of them are really just not allowed to speak about, if we talk about what a pharmaceutical has to say, some of the different medication forward approaches from the pharmaceutical companies or trying different things that challenge, accepted capitalist based medical practice, even though that's kind of against what they're going on, they'll scream and, dig their heels on that. And from the other side, there's a lot to acknowledge also. If you, a lot of right wing political leaning people will understand that the government overreach has gotten into a couple different things and made foods unhealthy or restricted access to things that might actually have beneficial properties in healing. We can go back into the uh, history of certain industry changes, like pasteurization of milk is a big one, and the left will say, science, science, we're saving people. You can get seriously sick if the milk's tainted or goes bad or spoiled. That's really a lot of the other food. We might not necessarily need government to get involved in that one. And at the same time, what are we losing nutritionally through the pasteurization process? I've got some crazy cats. They're doing their thing right now. So there's a lot of debates going on back and forth. And, it seems like we're only doing some science that benefits industry anyways, which is why we may not have the answers about that. And the fact that the people that really dominate and own the consumer packaged goods supply chain, it's not in their interest always to change things up. A lot of times we've had innovations in science to bring things to, the way that we do food now, what is different from 50 years ago. So, we've gone through different technology and evolutions of fats and oils to where when they first wanted to be able to make shelf stable products that could be transported across the country and, we don't lose anything and the consumer likes it, we switch from our butters and our natural oils to our hydrogenated oils and different things going on. So we may not have known at the time what that was going to do to our health, but the science was already there saying, oh, these things are better, and conveniently fits hand in glove with what commerce finds convenient for them. We find out now later where there's an American obesity epidemic, and instead of really being able to analyze the cause of that, we're still stuck in a culture where the individual is a sinner and it's on you. How dare you, gluttonous piggy, for eating too much, and it makes it difficult to get through all of these things and figure out, where we need to be with the diet. So I think now we've seen several different diet approaches over time, evolutions, Atkins, keto, Mediterranean, things in that vein that focus on being protein forward, lower in carbs, definitely eliminating the processed carbs, the seed oils, and combination of those things is really the approach that I've made with the content that I've done to get my weight loss, and that I'm building the Lizard Bites blog recipe catalog out of, and things that I'll be talking about. But it's just interesting that, we have a situation where there's a market for all kinds of things, but most of them are not making us healthy. They have juices marketed for diet, but they have added sugars, artificial sugars, a lot of the bars, even the way that we eat, our plate portions has all been culturally scripted for us to the point where we're at now. And I think that, in order to get past the metabolic challenges that, a dieter today has to have, or even a person trying to find a normal baseline diet just has to understand, we have to make a lot of these things ourselves. The foods aren't shelf stable. There's going to be more work involved, and finding the shortcuts and the recipes that make it possible, and the meal prep tricks, and building that up into a system that anybody else can do some of the things that I do is really what I'm trying to put out there with this to combat whatever it is. Are they trying to kill us, or are they just taking every dollar? Doesn't matter our health. They're just sell anything to us, and it's up to us. But there's a way out of it. Make your own jellos, do meal preps that are healthy, and set yourself up for success. If that's what you got to do it yourself. So if you like that, stick around, follow me, check out the blog for what recipes I'll put together, and subscribe, and I'll send the stuff to your inbox too. So glad to see anybody that has listened to me ramble this long, and welcome to